when we don't know the words to say, when we don't know how to pray, open the Psalms. And you have 150 options from which to choose to find your voice, to find the words to say when you have been reduced by life to silence. They are tightly bound and well-worn, burnished, meticulously worded poems, songs, songs of praise, songs of lament, songs of thanksgiving, doxology, songs of desperation, songs of communion. Search them and you will find your voice. And perhaps you already are familiar with one or two or more, ones that you go back to in a pinch or when you are truly lost or desperate, yearning, longing for God. I have a few that I go back to that I feel like are like an old comfy t-shirt that I keep in the back of the closet and I want to put on sometimes just for comfort's sake. Other psalms, I imagine, for you and for me, are like life rafts that we turn to in a panic, in a tempest-tossed time of life. And still others are like this psalm for today, Psalm 63, that we hold on to like a canteen, our last canteen of cool water in a dry and dusty desert place. O God, you are my God. I seek you, the psalmist says. I thirst for you. My soul thirsts for you, as in a dry and weary land. Now, in this psalm, the word soul occurs 3 times, and I'm going to use each of those times as a kind of marker. So just be grateful that for once in your time with me, you'll get a 3-point sermon. You didn't think I was going to do it, did you? These young whippersnapper preachers don't do 3-point sermons anymore. Well, I'm going to give you today a 3-point sermon. The first occurrence of the word soul, number 1, is this one. My soul thirsts for you. Now, this isn't just any old kind of thirst. This isn't your run-of-the-mill thirst. This isn't, my throat is parched. I'm thirsty. I need a drink. No, this is mortal thirst. This is dehydration. This is near death. This is panic thirst, desperate thirst. This is a deep desire, a longing. And perhaps most of us have never felt this kind of physical anguish, this kind of physical dehydrated thirst. Perhaps some of you have. But I bet all of you have felt a deep yearning, longing, desperation for God, for a person who is near to you but feels far away, or a person who is far away from you and you wish so desperately were near to you. You thirst for them. You long for them. You yearn for them. Your soul thirsts for them. The psalmist wants to feel the presence of God coursing down her throat, into her belly, spreading out into her bloodstream, to feel her thirst, her deep yearning quenched. It is a plea for God to come near, for someone to rescue her. My soul thirsts, she says. My soul, my life. And the word soul here really is better translated life. Now, this is an important reminder, because the word soul is kind of a big word in Scripture. Comes around on every page. What is a soul? Well, it comes from a Hebrew word, nephesh. And the word means, better translated, life. Everything about your life, your past, your presence, your idiosyncrasies, your hopes and your dreams, your memory, your history, your whole mind, your whole heart, your whole life, your first kiss, your last kiss, your career, your love for reading or basketball or singing in the shower. Maybe even your freshman year in college is included in what it means to say, my soul. Your marriage promises, your death, everything that is part of you is your soul. No part of this psalmist's visceral yearning is excluded from her soul. My soul thirsts for you. I long for you. My whole life leans into this yearning for God. Where does she go? This woman who thirsts, this psalmist who yearns for God, where does she go to have her thirst quenched? She says, I have looked upon you in the sanctuary. I don't know about you, but I grew up as a kind of a church rat. May not surprise you, I'm standing here now, but I was always in church, and I've always longed for these sacred spaces, and I like to have them all to myself sometimes, to come and be alone, and it's really a haven, a sanctuary, a place that's marked out for people to come and be close to God. Perhaps you have a sanctuary, this one. And maybe there are others, places you go and you know that you can count on a sense of closeness to God, a silence in which God speaks, God listens. One of my great teachers in life, Richard Lisher, wrote a memoir, Open Secrets, about his first pastorate in the rural area outside of St. Louis. He tells the story of one night he was asleep in his bed, sound asleep, and his wife nudged him awake. And she said, Rick, I think someone has broken into the church. And their parsonage was adjacent to the sanctuary, so she could hear something rummaging, some kind of racket. And so, of course, she made him go over. So he gets up, bleary-eyed and groggy, and puts on his overcoat and gets a flashlight and goes to inspect the sanctuary. And sure enough, upon entering, he finds that there was an intruder, a young woman, praying in the silence, in the dark, in the middle of the night. He said, what are you doing here? How did you get in? She said, I climbed through the window. And they sat together and prayed. She was so alone, pregnant, afraid, yearning for sanctuary, yearning for God to quench her thirst. The second time this psalmist mentions the word soul, though, she says, my soul is satisfied. My soul is satisfied as with a rich feast. Now, is she contradicting herself? She has just said that she is yearning, perhaps close to even to death. She's thirsty. She's longing. She's desperate. And now, in the next verse, my soul is satisfied. Is she contradicting herself? Because now we're standing in the middle of the psalm, and here's how the sentence runs. My soul is thirsty, but my soul is satisfied. Which is it? Is she longing? Is she yearning? Is she thirsty? Or is she as fat and happy and sated as an Easter afternoon, gathered with family and friends, a table full of food that's too big for anyone to finish in one day? Which is it? Thirsty? Or is she satisfied? These aren't two separate psalms. This is the same psalm. This is one of the mysteries of faith. To be thirsty and to be satisfied at the same time. She has a rich feast in front of her, perhaps really metaphorically she does, because her thirst is real, and she is desperate, and she is yearning. However, she is satisfied to know that because of who God is, God will be that way for her again and again. She's satisfied to remember God's character, God's nature, to be gracious, to be present, to be known and revealed, to come close to us. God has done it before, she says, and I know that God will do it again. I'm thirsty for it, but I'm satisfied in the faith of knowing, of being convinced that God will come close to me again. God will quench my thirst, and I will be satisfied, because that's what God does, and that's who God is. Because she knows God, she is satisfied in her hope. She is satisfied to meditate on him in her bed, she says. My soul is satisfied when I think of you on my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. What does she mean, her bed? What bed? Where? Perhaps she's lying in her own bed, in the comfort of her own home, surrounded by her familiar things and her knickknacks and her own cotton count sheets and her own mattress and the smell of dinner still lingering in the air, the comforts of home. And she's just praying her routine evening prayer. Or perhaps she's lying in the bed of her childhood home, and she's looking around at her stuffed animals and her trophies and her pictures and remembering all of the people that filled her life and made it so rich, and is satisfied. Perhaps she's lying in the bed of her own making, a bed of transgression, perhaps, and yet she still yearns for God to redeem her in this dark time. Maybe she's lying in a hospital bed after devastating news. Perhaps, though, she's lying in the bed of her own partner, her husband, and cherishing these moments with him, these final moments as she keeps watch over him in the night. The theologian William Stringfellow said something once about grieving that still bothers me. He was a bit of an eccentric man, but one of America's greatest prophets. William Stringfellow had a great friend that he lived with, and for years and years they worked together, they lived together, and then his best friend in the world, perhaps his only close friend, died. And years later, he said, after mourning him for so long, he said, the strangest thing happened. I began to I began to enjoy mourning him. Thirsty for him, and yet somehow mysteriously satisfied by his memory. Satisfied to recall him, to enjoy again and again the time they had together. I don't want to explain it too much, but I want to say something to you that a theologian, a dear, great mind and thinker of our country, one of our greatest prophets, said about his friend. I enjoyed mourning him, thirsty. And yet, when I sit on my bed and meditate, I'm satisfied. For you have been my help, says the psalmist. And I rest in the shadow of your wings. In the watches of the night, she says, I know God will help me. I don't know when. I don't know how. But I hope. And then the third and final time she says soul, she says it this way. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. So here is how the psalm is marked out. My soul is thirsty for you. My soul is satisfied by you because my soul clings to you. I am thirsty yet satisfied because I cling, because I hold on. Now, I didn't plan it this way. I didn't structure my sermon this way on purpose. But as I sifted through the text and meditated on it, a surprise came to me. There is a tradition in the church called the 7 last words of Christ. These are the 7, not just single words, but the 7 last words or phrases that Jesus said from the cross. You're all familiar with most of them, if not all of them. My God, why have you forsaken me? Perhaps the most famous is, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise, which he says to one of the robbers being crucified with him. But I was so delightfully surprised when I discovered that the 3 mentions of soul in this text correspond with the last 3 of the 7 words of Christ. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says from the cross, I thirst. It's not his human side saying, I thirst. There's no human side and no divine side to Christ. Jesus is fully God and fully man. This is a human Son of Man thirsting. This is the Son of God thirsting. My soul thirsts for you. Then in John he says, it is finished. It is finished. This is the next to last word from the cross. It is finished does not mean that he's done for. It is not what one theologian called a death gurgle. It is actually a cry of victory. It's a completion, an acknowledgement of satisfaction that he is able to say, I have come and I have done what I intended to do. I have fulfilled my mission and God is pleased. It is finished. My soul is satisfied. And then the last word. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. My soul clings to you. There will be suffering. We will walk down a path of difficulty in this life, and if it hasn't come to you, it will. And you will find yourself thirsty. And yet perhaps you will also find yourself mysteriously satisfied when you cling to him. Because as the psalmist says, he upholds me with his right hand. So cling to him when you are thirsty. Cling to him in the sanctuary. Cling to him on your bed. Cling to him in the watches of the night. Cling to him in your yearning and in your desperation. Cling to him in your longing and in your passion. And God will uphold you with his strong and mighty right hand. He will, because he has. It is his nature. This is our God. This is the God of Jesus Christ. Hang upon him, as John Donne said. Hang upon him who hangs on the cross, and under his outstretched arms, in the shadow of his wings, you will again sing for joy. Amen.